Good evening. I am Roberta Winters, President of the Radnor League of Women Voters. I'd like to welcome you this evening to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for the Radnor Township School Board. As you know, the League is a nonpartisan political organization, meaning we neither support nor oppose candidates. The League is dedicated to ensuring that all eligible voters have the opportunity and the information needed to exercise their right to vote. We have absentee ballots on the back table if anybody will need them. The League encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government. We work to increase understanding of major political public policy issues and influence public policy through education and advocacy. It is important that all parties know that the video of this meeting this evening may not be used for partisan political advantage. It must be used in its entirety. Let us begin now with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will serve as the moderator this evening, and a timer for this evening is Megan Gummel. Our Voter Service Chair, Gayla McCluskey, and Vice President Barbara Schroudenbach will assist this evening in gathering questions and screening them from the audience. The format of this evening is as follows. As you came in, you were given cards on which to write questions. They cannot be addressed to a specific individual and, if chosen, will be asked of each candidate. If you finish a question and would like to have it asked, please raise your hand and it will be picked up by a League member. Each candidate will have a 1-minute opening and closing statement. As time allows, we will ask the same question to each candidate, beginning with the candidate who comes next in alphabetical order. We will begin now with our candidates who are in alphabetical order, and I will introduce them to you. Andrew Brabson, Sarah Dunn, Dave Falcone, Eric Hickey, Susan Michelson, Bill Morrissey, Lydia Solomon, and Susan Stern. We request that you save all your applause until the end of the event. This is a time to listen and learn. Please do not respond or react to individual statements of the candidates. Our focus is on the issues, and I'm sure the candidates will be happy to remain a minute or two after the close of the event if you wish to follow up with them personally. We will now begin with our opening statement. Our timer will provide guidance to those who are candidates to help you keep your comments within the timelines. Thank you. Now, Mr. Brabson. Dr. Brabson. Babson.
It's okay. First, I'd like to thank members of the public for being here tonight, and especially the League of Women Voters for convening this forum. I'm Dr. Andrew Babson. I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm a college professor based at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education and at the Temple University College of Education. So I would bring to this board expertise in assessing the credibility and relevance and usefulness of educational research. So our board works within state-mandated budgetary restrictions, and Radnor citizens expect and deserve sound reasoning about how to best invest their tax dollars. But in order to maintain and, yes, build upon our reputation for excellence, we will, over the near and long term, need bold, creative, and big picture thinking about how we can best use our economic resources. As father of Radnor Elementary kindergartner Grant and 2-year-old daughter Isabel, I have a vested interest in this endeavor. I'd love to serve you as Radnor School Board Director. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Dunn.
Good evening, and thank you all so much for coming. My name is Sarah Holtman Dunn. I have been a resident of the Old Oaks neighborhood of Radnor Township for the last 14 years. My husband Michael and I bought our home here because we know this is a community that values public education the way that we do. We have 2 daughters who've been benefiting from that system since kindergarten, our 7th grader Guinevere at the middle school, and Jacqueline is our 4th grader at Radnor Elementary. I'm actually the product of both public and private education. I went to public schools in the suburbs of Pittsburgh and Lower Merion. Then I went on to Shipley, Amherst College, and I have a law degree from Columbia University in New York City. As a practicing corporate attorney, I have honed my skills as a negotiator, a listener, and an issue spotter. I'm not afraid to ask tough questions and respectfully demand the answers. I'm here to ask you for the privilege of serving on the Radnor Township School Board as an advocate for this community and our future.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone.
Thanks, Roberta. Thanks to the League. My name is Dave Falcone. I'm running for re-election to the school board. During the last 2 years, I've served on board leadership, first as vice president and now as president. During that time, specifically during our term of leadership, we've accomplished some really great things in Radnor. We hired a new superintendent. We inked him to a 5-year deal. We created stability in a position that had been unstable. We signed a new contract with our teachers 5 years and a year early. Again, without contentious negotiations, we created stability. These things are important, and they don't happen by accident. They happen through hard work, dedication, and leadership. And I've been a part of all of those things at this district. You run for different reasons. I run because I'm a lifelong Radnor guy. I've got 4 small children, 2 in our elementary, 2 on their way. These things, these decisions that we make, they're important, they're critical. There's no room for mistakes. You're going to hear a lot about different things between now and the election, about politics. This is not about politics. This is about performance, performance for our kids. And we've performed. I've performed. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hickey.
Thank you, Roberta, and thank you to the League. My name's Eric Hickey. I'm the Chief Investment Strategist at a wealth advisor located here in Radnor. I have 4 kids in Radnor schools right now, 3 at Ithan Elementary and 1 in the middle school. To date, our experience here in Radnor has been outstanding. It's why we moved to this area. And really for us, unless you live in other districts, you really can't appreciate how good it is and what we have here at Radnor. If elected, I really have the goal of maintaining what's going on in our schools right now, continuing the progress that has been made at the last couple of years, most specifically supporting Mr. Batchelor, his endeavors and his vision for the district. Second, maintaining fiscal prudence, really living within our budget to provide the best opportunities without spending too much. And 3, really improving the experience for the students and to prepare them for their time here in Radnor, in college, and beyond. So thank you very much. Ask you for support. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Michelson.
Good evening. Thanks to the League for hosting tonight's forum. It's a privilege to participate. I'm Susan Michelson, and I'm seeking re-election to the board for a 3rd term. I'm a second career educator, currently on staff at the faculty at Villanova School of Business, and I'm happy to report that I'm missing a faculty meeting tonight, so thank you. I've also had a 15-year business career. I'm a Georgetown grad. I have an MBA from Wharton and a theology degree. My children were in 4 of our 5 schools. My son Jeff graduated in 2011, my son Danny in 2013. I'm delighted to report that they are both, as of this June, now college graduates and happily working in their fields. Thank you to every Radnor teacher, administrator, coach, and employee who worked to make that happen. We are appreciative. As a board member, my primary concern is that we bring the best possible management to the challenge of educating our children well while carefully stewarding taxpayer dollars. I bring perspective and experience to that, and I look forward to serving you again.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you, Roberta, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us tonight. My name is Bill Morrissey. I've been a resident and homeowner here in Radnor for 12 years in Wayne. My wife, Karen Morrissey, and I have 3 kids. They have all graduated from Wayne Elementary, 2 from Radnor Middle School, and we're just getting our feet wet in the high school scene. I'm a corporate attorney and very proud to be running with Dave and Susan. I think the current majority of the board has done an excellent job over the last 2 years. Really hadn't started paying much attention until a few years ago. And I think the change that I've seen personally over the last 2 years has been astounding. And if I'm lucky enough to be elected, I'd like to continue that trend. I think they've done a great job with the superintendent. He seems to be very well able to handle the challenges that we have here in Radnor. And I think the union contract is a great news for all of us for the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Solomon?
Hi, I'm Lydia Solomon, and I'm seeking re-election to my third term on the school board. I also want to thank the League of Women Voters, to which I'm a member, for providing us this opportunity. I feel that I'm uniquely qualified to continue to serve on the school board. I'm a school psychologist by profession, so I understand the education process and how to get the best results for all students. I'm trained as an economist, and I have worked also as a college professor in the field of education. I am an experienced board member, and I've chaired various committees, and I think at this time in our district, it's important to have experience. We have several new administrators and a new superintendent. I'm a parent volunteer. I've worked as PTO president at all 3 levels of our district, and finally, I am a parent of 3 students who've all gone through the Radnor schools, and I'm very grateful for the experience they've had, and I want that for every Radnor student. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Stern.
Thank you, Dr. Winters, and thank you to the League for having us, and thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight to hear more about the candidates who are running for school board. My name is Susan Stern. I'm currently serving on the school board, and I'm hoping to be reelected. I've been serving for just shy of 4 years. I've lived here in Radnor for 17 years. I raised my children here. My youngest just graduated Radnor. My older son graduated Radnor as well. And I am an active community volunteer. I have been pretty much my entire time here. I've been serving on the Planning Commission for 8 years, and anyone who knows me knows that I've been a strong advocate for Radnor taxpayers and for the things that we value here. I've also been the treasurer for the Little League, the Cub Scouts, Skunk Hollow Community Garden, other community groups, and along with my work as a business manager of a local church, I feel that my financial background really gives me the opportunity to provide strong leadership for our district, and I do believe that is something that I would love to continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you all. It's now time for the League questions, and they'll begin with Ms. Dunn. As a board member, you must approve programs and curriculum. Given the limitations of time and money, there is tension between those who wish to strengthen traditional reading, writing, and arithmetic, and those who wish to embrace science, technology, engineering, and math. Please describe your leanings in regard to this tension.
Well, I actually am very fortunate. My 7th grader is in the watershed program this year. And I think that to the extent which for people who don't know is an integrated program that combines various fields of study into one field of study. So they study the watershed, the Upper Darby Creek. I actually think that there shouldn't be that tension. I think there's certainly room within our budget to find money to support all of those programs. And I think that it probably requires us to continue, our administration to continue their record of creativity and finding a way to strengthen them together and weave them together in ways that allow us to use our budget wisely.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone, same question.
Thanks, Dr. Winters. So being on the board, you have to certainly make very difficult decisions, though I would agree, I don't think there needs to be tension there. We have a budget, and what we've done on this board while I've been here is be able to sustain our programs, grow those programs, and be mindful of what we're offering to our students. We have an ability in Radnor to provide amazing education, great education, expansive education, and that's our job. And we can't overlook that what we do here is to provide the ability to deliver that education to all of our students. I think we're doing a great job as our board in making sure that our programs don't suffer as a result of potential budget limitations. We've been able to pass budgets, our last 2, 9-0. That shows our board is working hard and working collectively to make sure that we balance fiscal prudence while at the same time delivering top quality education.
Mr. Hickey.
So I think STEM recently obviously has made a big movement, I think, in school and in society in general. And as someone who went to a liberal arts college and frankly studied 4 years to become a doctor, and now that I manage money, I think one of the critical things we need to do is have a curriculum that teaches broad-based critical thinking, problem solving, those types of things. And whether there's a specialization in STEM or history or wherever it may go, I think, providing the electives for students to be able to explore those options is probably overshadows that of having, a concentration or any focus in any particular area.
Thank you, Ms. Michelson.
Hi, I also agree that there really ought not to be a tension between traditional programming and a STEM curriculum. I think traditional programming underpins a STEM curriculum. It's very hard to advance in science and engineering if you don't have a good math background. You also have to be able to read and write effectively in order to communicate your ideas. So it's both and, not one or the other. Insofar as the budgetary implications of those, we do have to balance requests, and I think two things are really important. One is that we are always evaluating these curricular decisions holistically, one overall against another and not in isolation. And two, I think it's important to recognize that great teaching comes from hiring great teachers. And when we have great teachers, we can deliver these things all across the board without necessarily seeing our budget skyrocket.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey?
Well, I'd like to echo Ms. Dunn. My daughter went through the watershed program and loved it. It was great for her. It may not be great for every kid. Some of those programs are very individualized, and I think that's one of the things that I like about Radnor and why we moved here is Radnor has the ability to provide an individualized education. We need to recognize where there's this tension between the sciences and the liberal arts, that not every kid is going to be a doctor, not every kid is going to be a poet or an actor, and you need to provide a broad curriculum that satisfies the needs of a diverse group of kids.
Thank you. Ms. Solomon?
So one thing that I've experienced while on the board is that there's often numerous points of view about any issue. And so one thing that I have offered since I've been on the board is the ability to listen to all different viewpoints with respect. And then try to seek the win-win solution for our community. And so that involves compromise and often taking the best pieces of what people are saying and putting a plan together that incorporates all of that. So with regard to this curriculum issue, I honestly think that in Radnor we do have the capacity to teach to a curriculum that will meet the needs of every student. And that does require fair resources, but not exorbitant resources. However, I believe the residents of Radnor demand excellent education, and I think the majority of people are willing to pay a reasonable price for excellence. And again, I do believe that excellent education in any subject comes down to the best teacher in front of the classroom. Thank you.
Ms. Stern?
Thank you. I would imagine that this has been a conversation going on for a long time in education, different thoughts on curriculum and what's the best curriculum to have. And I don't think that it has to be a conversation filled with tension. The district has a very vibrant curriculum review cycle to evaluate their programs. And I do think that we have a budget. We are blessed with resources that don't mean that these things have to be competing against one another. But with regard to kind of approaching what we're going to provide here in the district, there was a speaker at the opening day, George Corus, who spoke to the teachers about the innovator's mindset, and it was really a wonderful book and a wonderful perspective. And so the concept of looking at results-driven rather than data-driven information was one of the themes of how to evaluate these programs. And so, I think with a collaborative, results-driven orientation, it is really possible to provide here what we need for our kids and for it to not have to be filled with tension.
Thank you so much. Now for our next question. And
I'd love to.
Dr. Babson, I'm sorry.
Gee, Roberta. No.
I'm just moving right along.
It's okay. All right, so first off, I think it's good for us all to be aware that we have experts in the administration building on these topics. So the school board needs to work and should work with the administrators in that building. So as a school board member, I would be joining those experts and I would offer my voice with them and work with them. But on the subject of early reading, as has been alluded to, you can hardly think of a better investment of public dollars, just across public policy period, not just education policy, in early reading. It has benefits that go very far beyond school, into life and into the workforce decades later. So early reading skills affect early math skills, early science skills, okay? So that is something that is very important just to keep in mind. There needn't be a tension, as has been said, between STEM and reading. The two work together, and actually, as was mentioned with integrated curricula, the best curricula actually do work to join them together, although they might not always be the best for a particular student. Thanks. Sorry, I went over time.
Thank you. Mr. Falcone, under the law, the school board is required to provide special education to students. Given this mandate, please share your reaction to the following statement and how it might direct you if you were elected. Radnor's 2017 PSSA and Keystone test scores show a wide achievement gap. Historically, underperforming kids do a lot worse on these tests than their peers. In many grades, the percent of disadvantaged kids that are not proficient in a given subject is much higher than the grade as a whole, oftentimes even 3 or 4 times as high. How might that, again, impact you if elected, and what is your reaction to that statement?
Boy, Roberta, could you read it one more time? Yeah.
Radnor's 2017 PSSA and Keystone test scores show a very wide achievement gap. Historically, underperforming kids do a lot worse on these tests than their peers in our district. In many grades, the percent of disadvantaged kids that are not proficient in a given subject is much higher than that grade as a whole, oftentimes 3 or 4 times higher.
So I think it's a good question, Roberta, and I think it speaks to the type of education that we are striving to deliver here in Radnor and the type of education that we do deliver. There is absolutely no doubt that there are discrepancies and there are deltas in the way that our students are tested and the way that they perform, and we need to be mindful of that. And specifically when there are underprivileged children or children with special needs that require the extra attention. That's what makes Radnor such an amazing district, is because we do have the resources, we do have the capability to speak to those students and to work with those students, to deliver the best education we can to them. That's our duty, it's our responsibility as public educators. And I think that despite the scores, we need to be mindful of the type of education we're delivering. And I think, again, in Radnor, we have the resources, we have the ability, and I think it's a top priority for this district.
Thank you. Mr. Hickey.
So what I would say is, I understand we have to work within the constraints of the state, and there are a number of assessments that they have to set forth for students. But understanding that some kids may be challenged learning, others may struggle on standardized testing, others may need additional time. Being cognizant of that when students are working with teachers, I think, is very important. And really, as a school board member, I think we need to tackle the problem. I think. Probably at a macro and micro level. So understand, at the top level, how many students in this district, are being impacted by that. But then also at the micro level, really working with the teachers to understand, are there trends, are there certain things, certain types of students that are struggling with this particular curriculum in order to craft I would say, an effective solution to the problem.
Thank you. Ms. Michelson?
Yes, it's a challenging question to be sure. I think it's interesting. We have not yet been presented as a board with the 2017 results. That will actually come at the next curriculum meeting in November. But we are aware that this has happened. So historically, underperforming groups have been a problem. They were an issue last year, and they continue to be an issue this year. The question is diving into the data to understand precisely where we're experiencing it. Is it at a particular school level? Is it at all the schools? those are questions that need to be asked, and we need the administrators to help unpack what these scores mean. I think it's very important that we address adequate resources, as we have done during the entire time I've been on the board, to children who need extra help in whatever capacity. And I look forward to hearing what we'll be doing and how we're going to be fixing it, and to be a part of that.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey?
My wife and I have been blessed to have 3 wonderful kids. They're also 3 very different kids. And without getting into a lot of detail, we do have some experience with special education needs in the school district. Now, the district has a legal responsibility to ensure that each kid has an appropriate education. At the same time, we have to respect the fact that, as a board, the school district would have an obligation also to make sure that the costs are allocated appropriately to the taxpayers. I think one thing that can be a little short-sighted is if the school district were to not, to try to avoid early expenditures and put off problems until they become evident later. I think that early intervention is key. I think a lot of problems could be resolved if the school district took the steps early on, whether it's a reading problem or a behavioral issue, and not putting it off until it becomes a major problem.
Thank you. Ms. Solomon?
So thank you for this question. So I've served on the curriculum committee for the entire time I've been on the school board, and this is something we have always grappled with, how to serve every student in our district to the best of our ability. And it's interesting, I'm coming after Mr. Morrissey, because I think of the people on the board, I am was one of the strongest proponents of our full-day kindergarten program, which addresses exactly what he was speaking about, which is getting every student ready to learn and ready to take off when they reach first grade. And so that absolutely, I believe, it was a great place to put our resources. But actually, we know quite a bit about what to do with regard to special education. Special education, this is what I do in my career, is putting together a plan to meet the needs of the student. We wouldn't need to do elaborate legal plans if we had excellent teachers in every classroom who were doing that already. So that's what I'm striving for, is having trained, excellent teachers who can meet the needs of all our students.
Thank you. Ms. Stern?
So I heard this question to be more about the results of the PSSA and less about special education, although you did give that in your beginning intro. So with regard to the students who we identify as historically underperforming in our district, we do have them. And I think that this is at the heart of the difference between the 8 candidates up here. You have 4 people up here who are champions of public education. And at the heart of being champions of public education, what you have is a lot of research that demonstrates that access to high-quality pre-K for identified children is the way to provide early intervention, as Mr. Morrissey just mentioned, and that class size, something of which we are strong proponents to keep class size low, and having high-quality professional development for our teachers, that these are, along with the full-day kindergarten program, which we brought in, Lydia and I both supported, these are the cost-effective ways to both do what's morally right, which is to provide children who are historically underprivileged with what they need, and it's efficient in the long run to do that in an early fashion. Thank you.
Dr. Babson?
I promise I'll keep to time this time. So in 2012, I co-authored a paper looking at the costs of large-scale educational assessments for countries with limited budgets. And in that paper, I considered cost in a holistic sense. And so with limited budget, you have to decide, are you going to use this large-scale educational assessment and for what purpose? And intervention can be, and diagnosis can be a key function of educational assessment. So getting a child the help that he or she needs at a young age, that can be crucial, especially in early years. So I think that that is a very important function. However, another issue that I thought I could bring up is that with teacher evaluation, oftentimes test scores are weighted in a way that I think is a little bit too much. And I think that we should see teacher development and teacher evaluation in also a holistic sense, in using test scores as just one data point in that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dunn.
Thank you. I think there were a lot of things packed into that question. I think it did start with an issue of testing. I think there are a lot of questions in this community. I hear them all the time about the value of the PSSA and the Keystone exams. A, whether they really are testing the right things, and B, whether they're kind of asking us to change the type of teachers we have to being teachers who teach to a test. I don't think that's the kind of teacher we want to hire in Radnor Township. We hire teachers who work with students and work with them individually. I think that the full-day kindergarten was a great opportunity. I was really sorry we missed it in my family. We ended up having to pay for the aftercare or the full-day K-Club that was offered at Radnor, which was wonderful. But I think a full-day classroom with a kindergarten teacher gives them the opportunity to help, like Bill said, spot those issues early and identify the needs of these students. So I think that it's important that we pay attention to those tests, but I think we need to make sure that we trust our teachers and our administration to be working with the parents individually to help those students.
Thank you. Mr. Hickey, yours is the next question. Some Radnor residents are concerned that the school board needs to adopt rules and regulations to protect student health and safety based on extensive research by medical professionals. Concerns include athletic programs that have a high correlation with concussions, and also school hours that are not consistent with adolescent sleep needs. On what basis will you make decisions regarding these matters of growing local, state, and national interest?
Thanks. So I think the short answer is really a thorough review of the data. That's what I do in my day-to-day, is really pour through economic and other variables that are present in the world, and really make decisions upon those. I think, interestingly enough, this year the Nobel Prize winners actually, had their thesis on circadian rhythms, and I believe sleep is an incredibly important thing for adolescents. I see it with my kids as homework mounts and pressure and activities, and then you add on to that a lot of pressure from parents in this community. It's really important for them to get their sleep. As far as concussion and sports are concerned, I think the data is still coming out, and I think the studies have proven that specialty or repeated violence to the head obviously is not good for you. You've seen practice and sports specialization now not be encouraged anymore, but I think for me it would really be sitting down with the experts and understanding what the data actually tells us.
Thank you. Ms. Michelson?
Yes, I think both of these things are things we have been discussing at the school district, particularly sleep. We've got a study underway right now to review everything that's out there. We are taking it very seriously. There is no question but that is an issue, adolescent sleep. There's no argument with the data. There's really no argument with what the experts have said. The same, I think, holds true for concussions. There are kids who are put into situations as a consequence typically of playing a sport where they are at risk for getting a concussion. I've nursed kids through them. I've actually had a couple myself, one of which occurred on the campus at Radnor High School, and I won't go into that. But the thing that has to get measured is, what are we as a district willing to do in terms of risk versus desire to continue to participate in any of these things? How do we want to evaluate the practical restraints over and against the physical risk? And we'll do that, we'll measure it, and we'll draw a conclusion and decide based on data. Thanks.
Mr. Morrissey?
So I have coached lacrosse, I've coached soccer. My son is currently at a football game, and so I have a firsthand experience with being concerned about kids, my own child, having head injuries and other injuries. My daughter does a lot of dance. They have plenty of injuries too. You do need to balance the benefits that children get from exercise and being outside, not locked up in a government institution all day, but outside on the field, having fun. And with the chance that those kids will get injured, I'll say firsthand, my experience has been that at the youth level, the coaches, the football coaches in particular, are very, very focused on the issue of concussions. They're putting the kids' safety first. I can't say that I have firsthand experience at the middle school and the high school coaches, but I would hope they're doing the same. I'm sure that Mr. Batchelor expects them to do the same. And if I were on the board, I would make sure that it was clear to everybody in the school that our kids' safety comes first when it comes to sports. Thank you.
Ms. Solomon?
So for me, the health and safety of our students is a paramount concern. These are two different issues to me, though. So with regard to the sleep study, there's no refuting that teenagers are not getting enough sleep. We have convened within the curriculum committee a study this year to look at all the aspects of that. With regard to the school start time, I actually think that what will come out of it is a broader question, which is how much stress in general we're putting on our teenagers, which impacts the fact that they're doing homework till midnight, in addition to all the technology they're on, and they're not getting enough sleep. So I think it's going to be a broader issue than just what time school starts. With regard to concussions, we also know that traumatic brain injury can have long-lasting effects. This is something I deal with in my job. And so we absolutely need to be mindful of what we're doing that's going to put children at risk possibly for their whole life.
Thank you. Ms. Stern?
It's exactly, I had just written the same notes that Lydia wrote, which is that ultimately we are talking about the health and safety of children, and there are a myriad of topics on this subject. Stress and depression being some of the other notable issues of health and safety that we deal with. With regard to the sleep needs of teenagers and their circadian rhythms, we had a panel last year of experts. And from that panel and from hearing that the community is very interested in hearing that, the district is embarking on a community study, and we want to gather a lot of input. And I think that this is going to be a focus. It's a focus of our district initiatives, and it's going to continue to be. With regard to sports injuries and head injuries in particular, I think we have ignored this. I think it's been brought forth to our meetings a number of times, and we've not actually dealt with this yet, and we need to. We need to bring in a panel of experts to kind of tell us what we don't know, and then from there look to try to approach this conversation from two perspectives. What are the best practices that the district can have to minimize or eliminate injuries? And ultimately, are we going to be brave enough to have a conversation if the risk reward is just not great enough? Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Babson?
Sure. So on these two issues, I think the science is actually very compelling. On the sleep issue, it's pretty settled. Adolescents need at least 8 hours of sleep a night. And their circadian rhythm pushes them up to want to go to sleep around 11 o'clock. And so that's something that should be kept in mind. And it was also brought up about glowing rectangles, et cetera, that we all love, but these can have some special impact for adolescents who need sleep. Regarding concussions, I was a multi-sport athlete in high school and in college. I played football for 5 years on the line. I know that subconcussive blows can have lifelong effects. It's an issue that's near and dear to me. My son in 8th grade, when he asked me, can I play high school football? I don't know. Will the technology have advanced by that point? I don't know. But it's something that we should take very seriously. And as Susan said, if we have to take the hard decision to, let's say, switch to flag football rather, then maybe that's something that we should look to later on down the road. Thank you.
Ms. Dunn?
So I think these are both great issues, and I'm really happy. I've been at a couple of these curriculum meetings where curriculum committee meetings where they've been talking about this adolescent sleep study. I know it actually was brought up a year ago and brought forward by a committee of very concerned parents. I think it got kind of set aside while we were trying to find a new superintendent, but I'm glad that it's back on Mr. Batchelor's radar and that it's something that the district is focusing on. I was a little concerned. We had a student the other night at that meeting, or the other afternoon, saying, but I have so much homework, how am I ever going to get to bed if I'm working that late? And I think it's true. Their circadian rhythms keep them up later. They need to realize that if they've actually got a proper amount of sleep, that they will be able to do that homework probably a lot more efficiently. It's probably worth helping teachers understand, though, what's valuable homework and what's good input. As to concussions, I'm very fortunate. I always played non-contact sports as soon as that was an option. For those of you who haven't seen me stand, I'm very small. But I do think that it's something we need to be aware of. I'm glad that the board is considering the Rothman Institute study as a way to help address that.
Thanks,
Mr.
Roberta.
Falcone.
Yeah, so I'll clean it up here, right? So I think everything you've heard from the panel here is real, and I can speak as a parent. I can speak as a husband. Especially of somebody who has a newborn. Sleep is critical at any point in your life. And in my house right now, it's at a premium. So we understand it. And one of the things we're doing is we're convening this sleep study. But I'll note to everyone here and everybody listening, our superintendent, this was his passion in the district he came from. He led the charge there to evaluate this issue. And he is focused on it, and we as a board are focused behind him on it. So it's very important. With respect to concussions, I, too, have kind of firsthand experience with that. I've played contact sports, and it's a real issue. But there is a balance here. This is not something we can wake up one day and say there's an issue, we need to stop all contact sports. There is a science to this, and there's a science much higher than where we are. There's a national study on this. You have the NFL evaluating it with endless resources there. I think we have to be very much in tune with their data and make sure that we're following it very closely to make sure that our children, really the most important here, that they're safe.
Thank you. Now it's Ms. Michelson's question first. Excellence in public schools and education draws many families to Radnor. How do you keep Radnor schools at the forefront of education? As a board member, can you be specific about what you have done or what you will do to keep Radnor schools forward-looking and at the cutting edge?
Yeah, that's a great question. We absolutely have to keep Radnor schools forward-looking and at the cutting edge for our children and for our future. We are educating children who we hope will come back here, become employed, buy our homes, pay taxes, and continue to sustain our community. What have I done? I've been on the board for 8 years. In the last 2, I've had a pretty significant role in bringing on a new superintendent who is focused on what needs to be done financially as well as educationally. It's important that we have strong budgets and are looking and understanding what the things we need to do in order to keep Radnor excellent, including facilities, including hiring, including program changes. We want to evaluate them over and against one another to make sure we're getting the best value for our money. But that we have to do it is absolutely essential, and I will continue to support that as long as I am on the board and as long as I'm in the community.
Thank you. Mr. Morrissey.
I'm obviously not on the board, so I don't have a list of achievements as a board member, but I see the board's role as primarily being one of dealing with budgetary issues, hiring good administrators, and negotiating good contracts with the teachers union. And one of the challenges of running this year is that I think my colleagues on the board here, Susan and Dave, have done a good job in preparing Radnor for the future with a long-term union contract so that we won't be dealing with labor issues and kind of distracting from the core mission of teaching kids. And I think they've hired a great administrator in Mr. Batchelor. And I think that continuing to refine and review the administration and make sure that the resources are being allocated correctly among our administrators is probably a good step to making sure that we have a sustainable budget and a sustainable program for the future for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Solomon.
Okay, so this is actually one of my absolute passions. I've served on the curriculum committee. Again, I think I said that the entire time I've been on the board. I think that in order to keep Radnor excellent at the forefront of education, we need to have a challenging and progressive curriculum. And I've spent countless hours working, supporting the administrators and teachers in crafting that and changing that and studying it and revising it to get the best outcome for our students. I think we also need to be mindful that class size is critically important to good educational outcomes. And we have guidelines within Radnor, and sometimes it's appealing to the administrators to violate them. And I think you will hear, if you go back through the budget tapes and the budget meetings in the past 8 years, every time the budget comes up, I ask the question, does this budget allow us to maintain all of our current programs and services, and does it allow us to keep within our current class size guidelines? Because if it doesn't, it's not good enough. Thank you.
Ms. Stern.
I would love to serve on the curriculum committee. That would be such a privilege. With regard to keeping our district at the forefront, I have 3 words: full-day kindergarten. I fought for it, I supported it, I believe in it. We are the leader, and other school districts look to our school district as the district that has it. So I'm very proud of that. But beyond full-day kindergarten, some of the other achievements that our board has experienced in the last few years, budget processes, teacher contract that was very successful, and I believe that it does give our superintendent the labor piece that he needs. And the hiring of our new superintendent was not done by the work of just 1 or 2 people. That was actually a board that worked together, worked collaboratively and cooperatively to bring about those successes. That's not the success of any one of us, least of all me. The other things for the forefront, I'm working on the technology evaluation study, and I've been bringing forth this particular question. What technology skills are critical for our students to learn, and then what technology hardware is best appropriate to support those skills?
Dr. Babson.
So one statement that I would just like to put out there is that our decisions as board members, as school directors, flow from core values. And one of my core values is that I'm a champion of public education. So as a champion of public education, I believe in the teachers that we recruit, and I believe that we need to support them with excellent professional development opportunities. And also, I think that the choices that have been made recently, especially full-day kindergarten, that does set us apart as a local district. It is discussed among parents, especially for people like me that have kids 6 and 2 years old, very important for us, okay? I also think that with our vast resources, we should be thinking of ourselves as leaders, as trendsetters, not trend followers, but trend setters. So what is important and interesting and innovative in the field of, let's say, learning technologies? How can we use the latest research in a prudent and fiscally responsible way? Thank you.
Ms. Dunn?
Yes, I actually think that one of the greatest resources in helping us stay on the cutting edge is, frankly, our teachers. As long as we keep class sizes at a level that is manageable for them, they will go out and do things that are unbelievable. I had my daughter, when she was in 5th grade, had Mr. Serpico. He had a parent come in and say, my child needs more work with writing. He went out and found a writing contest. He got those kids actually into the Constitution Center essay contest. They ended up doing an entire extra project on the 4th Amendment to the Constitution. Not something that was actually in the curriculum, but something that he realized his students were up for the challenge for, and they got this great extra opportunity. I think those are the kinds of things we need to encourage. We need to listen to the community. We have a brilliant community who's willing to come in and tell us what they want. There's been a real increase in cultural awareness and cultural programs in the PTO. I think that they would be happy to contribute to the district. So I think it's a matter of listening and being aware and helping our teachers proceed with the progress they've made.
Mr. Falcone?
Thanks, Roberta. So you want to know how we get great, we stay great, and we get better. We work as a team of 9. Some of the decisions you've heard tonight, things we're most proud of, they came as a result of a 9-0 vote, a board working together, using all of our assets for this district. What you do is you hire the best teachers. You treat them fairly. You give them a good contract. You hire the best administrators. You treat them fairly. You give them a good contract. And you know what we do? We get out of the way, because that's not our job. We equip them, and we stand back, and we let the very best and brightest, which is what we have in Radnor, we let them do their job. And that's why Radnor is excelling right now. It's because they've got the tools, they've got the resources, and they've got a board functioning at a very high level to support them.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey.
But Eric will take credit for it. It's all good.
To really reiterate what Dave said, I think it's all very applicable. And I think one of the most important points he made was working really as a unit. So you can hire the best teachers, but if they're unhappy, either with their contract level or with the administrators, I'm sorry about I don't think it functions very well. One of the experiences that we've had as a family here in Radnor is the individual focus that you get. It's analogous to a private school education, quite frankly. And I think overall, I think everyone here is in agreement. We want the best for our kids. And I think there's more and more coming out now understanding how curriculum and how school can help your kids be successful beyond school, not just in school. And I think that starts in the beginning with the building blocks of reading and math. I believe a lot's going to come into curriculum, incorporating technology both from a good standpoint and a bad standpoint. And then third is really understanding socially how teenagers, how adolescents interact, and equipping the teachers with the ability to really help and coach them as they move forward through life.
Thank you. It's time for another question, and Mr. Morrissey, it goes to you first.
Thank you, Dr. Winters.
As many of you realize, the League of Women Voters has always supported nonpartisan school board elections. However, they are not nonpartisan. However, we are pleased that in the recent past, the school board has been operating in a bipartisan manner. If an incumbent or a new member were elected to the board and the political partisan balance would change, how would you strive to assure that a truly bipartisan spirit and relationship would continue?
So I actually spoke about this a little bit the other day at the school board meeting. Before I actually ran for school board, I was of the mind that there should be no partisan leaning towards the school board elections. And there may be better ways to do it than the party way of doing it that we have today. But it actually serves a fundamental purpose of helping candidates like me and Sarah and Eric and Andrew run. I don't think I could run if there wasn't a party behind me that was putting together postcards and mailings and things like that. So I just want to say, while I respect, the idea that the election should be nonpartisan, it is in reality just part of life. I think what happens once you become a board member is you need to put the partisanship aside. You need to put your personal feelings about national politics, about who's the president, about whatever the pet projects are that you think would be good, and as a board member, serve the interests of the students first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I share the idea that school boards should probably be nonpartisan, but the reality is that in Pennsylvania, and certainly in Radnor, it is not. A lot of you don't know this, but when I was a child, my mother was on the school board for many of the years I was in public education. With regard to what I would do in Radnor, I think I have demonstrated that. The last few years, I've been in what is called the minority position, and I have chosen to be cooperative, to put the best interests of the community and our students ahead of my own personal or political beliefs. I have chosen to work with the system, and I think it's kind of important to point out that the successes that people are claiming for the school district are because of a group of people working together. They aren't the credit to any particular few people, but they're to the credit of all people putting their best efforts together to try to work together for everyone's benefit. And I would say that I will continue that if reelected. Thank you.
Ms. Stern?
I serve as the chair on the policy committee, and last year we passed a policy 004 which calls for training of new school board members. Now, as it happens, Mr. Falcone and I participated in some school board training when we first joined the board, and I will speak for myself, but I found it invaluable in learning what my role as a school board director and what it truly means to govern and to provide governance. And so I would agree that the way the system in Radnor works has a political party associated with it. But I really feel that how I have conducted myself and how I would continue to conduct myself is that once you're elected to the board, actually your most important job is, and it says it in our policy, is to be a champion for public education and to do all that is necessary to support the district. So there are times when we have to behave in ways that are always for the best of the district, and that's how I would continue to conduct myself.
Dr. Babson?
So we live in a multicultural, pluralistic society. And so part of being an American is being open-minded and making space for others and trying to understand others. That, to me, is a big part of being an American. And so I think that values have brought us here to Radnor Township to live, and I think we share a lot of the same values. And I think that that's something that we can remember when we sit down here and we do our work here. I think that we can remember that we're citizens, we're parents, we share the same values. But I also agree that you need to have a core set of values as an individual, I believe. So that's what I would bring. I would bring a core set of values, okay, around championing public education. But the work of government means being open-minded and compromising where necessary for the good of meeting a common goal, which is doing the best that we can for Radnor kids. Thank you.
Ms. Dunn?
So basic math, if I were afraid to work with Republicans, I wouldn't run, because all four of the Democrats have to win for the Democrats to actually take back control of the board. I'm happy to work with Republicans. I work with them in the office. I work with them in my family. Most of my extended family happens to be Republican. And I come to school board meetings, and I watch, and I know who's reasonable and rational, and I understand that there are a lot of places in which I overlap with them. Again, I'm only going to be one voice on the 9-member panel if I get elected. And I know that that's a voice that has to be reasoned and rational, or they'll stop listening. So much as I would expect them to listen to me when I'm being reasonable and rational, I will certainly be happy to listen to reasoned positions and be open-minded, because they probably are interacting with lots of other people in the community that I haven't met. And it's important. We're all bringing views from our local, smaller pockets of Radnor to try and make sure that this is the best school district in the area and the country.
Mr. Falcone?
So I said it in my opening, Dr. Winters, and I'll say it again. There is no room for political party or politics on a school board. It is about performance. And I've said it a couple of times, I'll say it again. This board right now is performing as a group of 9. There's no we, there's no them. It's us, and we are working for this township. That is what being on a school board is about. If we can't do that, we shouldn't be here. And I'm very happy to say, since I've been on this board in both the minority position as a Republican and now in a majority position as a Republican, I haven't changed. My acts haven't changed. My decisions haven't changed. I am who I am. And you're going to get that, I guess, whether you like it or you don't. If you vote for me, great. If you don't, then I guess it's not so great. But I'm the guy. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm a resident of Radnor. I'm a dad. I'm a guy who cares about what happens here. There's no politics. There's no politics.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey.
So, yeah, I guess when the signs go away on November 8th or 9th or whenever we get around to picking them up, I'd say whoever, is left standing here and, will be in the back rooms on the curriculum committees, the finance committees, the policy committees. I think, as Dave pointed out, everyone has the same goal here, and that's the school district, the kids, and to represent the taxpayer in the best way that they can. And I'm committed to do that. My fiscal views and social views, I may agree with the 8 other people here, or 2 or 3, and I don't really think that really comes into play, as all the decisions that I'll make are for the best of the district.
Thank you, Ms. Michelson.
Thanks, Roberta. As president of the board last year, when we had a change in board leadership, I came to that role with a list of things that I think are absolutely essential in this addressing this question. Number one, we vote as a team. We consider things as a team. We never just count to 5 and ram something through. Okay, that doesn't happen. in my view. We have to listen to everyone. There are opinions that come up that represent things we haven't thought of or considered. We absolutely have to allow that to inform our views as they develop. We've got to be persuasive in order to build consensus, because consensus is how we move things forward. We have to set a tone of welcoming collegiality. I want people to feel free to express themselves, and I want them to feel as if it's a safe place to do so, whether in the public or on the board. Rely on data, and let's get to yes, and that moves us forward, and I think that's what you've seen over the last couple of years.
Thank you. It is now Ms. Solomon's turn for the first question. This will be your last question, so you know. Over the past years, there have been several national and state policy shifts in education. For example, last summer, the Pennsylvania Senate passed a bill that would allow teachers to carry guns in school. Just last week, the Secretary of Education rescinded 72 guidance documents that outline the rights of students with disabilities. How do you feel national and state level policy changes the impact and what we can do in our public schools in Radnor?
Okay, so you may see a slightly different viewpoint among the members up here. I believe that we should be champions of public education. And so I am alarmed by what I see at the state and federal level and how it impacts public education. I put forth a proposal in January to encourage our federal representatives to vote down the proposed Secretary of Education, and I was the lone voice for a while up here, and then Susan and Amy joined me. But I think we have many people in federal and state government that are out to dismantle public education. I view public education as the bedrock of a good democracy, so this is a time for us to pay attention. With regard to taking away, this happened over the weekend, the 72 guidelines for special education, that to me is crazy. That is going to lead to inefficiencies in educating special ed children, and it's going to put our most vulnerable children at risk. So again, these are things to really pay attention to.
There's a referendum on the ballot in November it's asking, does the state do we want to elect to have a constitutional amendment to allow for up to 100% of local real estate tax to be exempted for funding public schools. And in a bipartisan manner, the school board and many school districts near us are voting against it and asking voters to vote no. So for those of you who are listening, please vote no on the referendum question. That's my personal opinion right now. That type of legislation just really underscores how much public education is under attack in our country. And we can be a school district that thinks that we are immune, or we can be a school district that leads the way and says, no, public education is important, and that at every opportunity for us to stand up for it, we should do so. Thank you.
Dr. Babson.
So this is related to a question earlier about nonpartisanship. So I voted Republican up until the early 2000s. Then I was a registered independent, then registered Democrat. And so I understand different points of view, and I understand how people can have reasoned disagreements. However, I do think that the Republican Party on a national level has gone farther to the right than I remember voting for as a young man. And so I think that the current policy decision by the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, shows an extremism that would be unwelcome here in Radnor Township. And I think that that is something important for us to keep in mind, that the national, local, state levels are connected, okay? As far as the guns in schools issue, that's down the road, but it's just important for people to realize that it empowers the school board to make decisions about that. Thank
Yeah, I actually have to say I do think that public education is frankly under attack at a national and a state level. I think it was Mr. Madden, Director Madden, who mentioned the other day that he was at a legislative meeting, and actually there's a kind of a push in the Senate to actually even get rid of the Pennsylvania Department of Education. I hope I didn't misunderstand that, but that's what it sounded like. And that's just shocking to me, because I don't care if you think that they're doing things wrong, then you change the people who are there. You don't say we're a state that doesn't even value education enough to bother to have a department that governs it. That's just disgusting. And I think it's important that there be people at the local level. Ironically, it's the Democrats who want to be in local control and defend public education. Guns don't belong in our schools. I don't think this group of Republicans necessarily thinks they do, but the fact that there's actually a party that thinks that we should empower school boards to allow guns in our schools, and it may not be in Radnor, it may be in the township next door. So then this board has to decide, do we let our kids play sports there? Do we let them go to events there because we know there may be guns in the building? I just think it's the kind of thing that you need to make sure you have the right people considering these things at a local level.
Mr. Falcone.
Come on now. Let's think about this for a second. Let's think about this for a second. We're talking about Radnor here, people. We're talking about practice. We're talking about Radnor. And I'm hearing so much noise anymore about what's happening in Washington and what's happening in Harrisburg. I'm hearing about what's happening on this dais on Monday nights. Well, let me tell you what's happening in Radnor right now, on Tuesday nights, right here. Lots of good things. And it has nothing to do with Republicans or Democrats or whether you like Trump or don't like Trump. That's noise. Do not be distracted. What is happening here right now is amazing. And it's this board. This board is doing that. And we are a collective group of Republicans and Democrats, and we get along. And we don't talk about what's going on outside of here. Because you know what? What we talk about in our house at our dinner table, that's for us to worry about there. Our job here in these seats on Tuesdays is to worry about what happens in this district. And we're doing an awesome job.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey.
I echo what Dave said. I'm all for keeping everything and all the control local. I would say on the issues you addressed, I would be surprised if anyone wasn't on the same page, regardless of their political affiliation. I understand that as a public institution, we're going to be subject to some state and national level policy, I would say. But I think there's a lot that we can do as a community, in particular the vote that's coming up in about 10 days regarding the appropriation of taxes and the real estate tax. And if it comes to that, I think we can all rally around as a community to our congressmen and our senators in order to fight these things and keep control here. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Michelson.
Hi. So with regard to the specific question, Pennsylvania allowing guns in school, my understanding of that particular decision is that it was allowing rural districts in parts of the state, not here, to be able to defend themselves because they are so far from law enforcement. I think when you take the intent from that and understand what that's going for, I'm not particularly an advocate for guns in school of any sort, but I'm willing to hear that there are other places that may have needs that we don't encounter here. So never in Radnor, and I'd like to understand better what the legislators have in mind. As far as the regulations, I'm not an apologist for the Trump administration. I'm not an apologist for Betsy DeVos. That said, the regulations were described as outdated, unnecessary, or ineffective, and have no effect on special ed services. I hope that that's true. But I also echo what Dave said. We are about Radnor here, what's best for Radnor, and such rhetoric and decision-making, not on my term, not while I'm here at all.
Thank you, Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you, Dr. Winters. It's interesting because this question touches on one of the prior questions about partisan politics and the school board. And I think what we're seeing here is that there are, like many in Radnor, have deeply held beliefs about national and state issues. I think the attempt to have the board draft an angry letter about Betsy DeVos was a good example of sort of a divisive approach that really wasn't putting the interests of the children first. I think what Republicans are generally about is about local control. I'm in favor of local control. What works in Radnor for our Radnor students is not something that may or may not work in Reading. What works in West Philadelphia may not work in Radnor. I don't want Harrisburg to be in charge of our budget. I don't want Washington to be in charge of our curriculum. I don't want Washington to be in charge of what we serve our kids at lunch. Radnor Township deserves a school district that serves the students of Radnor Township, and national politics should be set aside when it comes to serving our students. Thank you.
Thank you. It's now time for your 1-minute wrap-up, and we're going to start with Ms. Stern.
Well, thank you again for having me. So over the past 7 months, I've had the distinct pleasure to work with Lydia and get to know Andrew and Sarah and a host of volunteers for whom I'm very grateful, listening to voters about what's important to us in Radnor. And it's very important, it's very clear that public education is what's important here in Radnor. And I really am confident that our team, although we have different backgrounds, different age children, different areas of expertise, we are anxious and willing to work together to bring our diverse and complementary set of skills here to the school board. But the reality is that I will continue to be who I am and stand up for what I believe, and that's not going to change, and I would love the opportunity to do that along with my fellow colleagues and running mates. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Babson.
Yes, so it's been a pleasure to be here tonight and to talk about the issues together. Just want to echo some statements earlier that even though we might have disagreements, I think it's important to hold on to one's core values while also being open to what other people have to say. As a college professor, I have a duty, and I honor that duty, to be open-minded and neutral with my students, whether they're superintendents in Penn's executive education program or Temple undergraduates. I need to be neutral and open-minded and help us get to a place where we can build mutual understanding together. So I would bring that sensibility to the board. I would also bring, as I said earlier, an expertise in educational policy and research. And also, as I've said earlier, we have experts in our district, in our administration. So we would be working together, again, to do what's best for Radnor educational stakeholders. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dunn.
Thank you. You know, I want to say before I ever decided to run for school board, I did actually come to some curriculum and board meetings. And one of the things I came about adolescent sleep, I came because I was outraged when this board took over this leadership that the budget that was being approved that year was going to slash teachers. And in fact, my 6th grader ended up in a grade that had exceedingly large class sizes. They had 31 students in a 6th grade algebra class. Her honors language arts class had 28 kids. Both of those well exceeded the class size limits that we've all agreed to pay for in this township. I know that most parents in this township are busy. You're busy, you work. Even if you're not a parent, you're busy and you work, right? You're community members, you're doing other things. You elect board members who you trust to show up to those meetings and vote in your best interests, who share your values, who share your interests, and who believe that every child in this district is entitled to the best quality education your money can buy. That's why I want to serve on the board.
Thank you, Mr. Falcone.
Thanks again, Dr. Winters. Thanks to the League. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Thank you to the thousands at home that are watching on television. One of the great things about being an incumbent in any position, but especially on this board, is that when you're running for re-election, you can point to a record. And I can point to mine, and I am very, very proud of it. We've done some really great things since I've been on the board. We've hired a new superintendent. We've got labor peace. We are fiscally responsible. We're preserving important programs. We're doing all the things we can do for our children, for our taxpayers, all the things we're elected to do. I think I've been a big part of that progress. I think I've been a big part of that growth about bringing this board together. I'm really happy about that. It's a part of my record, actually, I'm most happy about. Now is not the time to start looking elsewhere for reasons to vote against this type of progress. Look right here. You should be proud of the things we've accomplished. I'm very proud of it. I want to keep doing it. That's why I'm running again. And I want to do it with the people on my slate. I want to do it with Susan Michelson, Eric Hickey, and Bill Morrissey. So on November 7th, I'm asking for your vote. Let's keep this going.
Mr. Hickey?
So Dave's my neighbor, which is both a blessing and a curse. But as you can tell, his enthusiasm for Radnor is infectious, and is really what sparked my interest in pursuing election for school board. Like I said, I have 4 kids already in the school system. They're going to be there for another 12 years. And frankly, having an impact and shaping the education that they're going to get during that time period is something that's, I believe, very powerful and very exciting for me. I'm new. I haven't served on the board yet. I'm excited, if I do get elected, to go through the training program, as well as find my spot on the board where I could be most impactful. And so in a couple of days, I ask for your vote, as well as Bill, Susan, and Dave. Thank you.
Ms. Michelson?
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you to the League. Our district is in a great place right now, and I've had a strong role in making that happen. We have a skilled and accomplished chief executive officer and our new superintendent, and he's identifying change and moving in many areas where I've supported him and will continue to do so and help shape the direction he's going. I am a champion of public education, and I am a champion of Radnor's public education. We have a wonderful district here, and because things are going well, they are going well not on their own, but because we have intentionally decided that it is important to work together to get these kinds of things accomplished, and we're doing it. I'd like to keep that going, and I'd like to ask for your vote on November 7th, along with my colleagues, Dave, Eric, and Bill. Thank you.
Mr. Morrissey?
Thank you, Dr. Winters, and to the League, and thanks for everybody who came out today. My first few years here in Radnor, I have to confess, I really didn't pay any attention to local politics. I thought, there's a lot of really smart people in Radnor. There's a lot of people who care about their schools and their kids. They're probably doing a great job. I don't really need to pay attention. Then one night, my wife came in and said, you have to see this. And she put on the YouTube video of one of the Township meetings while they were debating full-day kindergarten. And I watched it mesmerized for an hour or two. I thought, this is must-see TV. And frankly, the Radnor School Board meetings shouldn't be must-see TV. They should be really boring. They should be quiet, respectful. They should get business done quickly. They shouldn't go on for 4 hours. They should just move business along and let the administration do its job. I think the last 2 years, I've seen a real change in the way the board's operated. That is to the credit of everybody currently on the board, not just the majority, everybody. But if I am lucky enough to be elected to the board, I hope to continue the trend that we've seen the last 2 years of having competent and quiet leadership at the board level. Thank you.
Ms. Solomon?
So I want to thank everyone for their interest in education. I want you to know that it's been my honor to serve you the past 8 years on the school board. I take this responsibility that you've entrusted to me very seriously. I'll strive to provide the best educational outcome to all students at a fair price to the taxpayers. I believe in seeking the win-win solution to complex problems, and that involves listening to all points of view. However, I will also fight passionately for the things that I believe will make education excellent, those being having an innovative and challenging curriculum, to keep our class sizes small and abide by the class size guidelines, to retain and recruit the best teachers and administrators. If you're pleased with my service on the school board and my viewpoint on this, I encourage you to support me along with Susan Stern, my like-minded running mates, Susan Stern, Sarah Dunn, and Andrew Babson. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. Let's give them all a well-deserved round of applause. I would encourage each of you to find out more about our candidates at the League's nonpartisan website, vote411.org. There's also information there about the referendum item on the ballot, And thanks to the cooperation of the Pennsylvania Bar Association, you can also locate information about the judges on this site. I wish to remind you all that next Monday evening, October 30th, we are looking forward to hearing from our candidates for Township Commissioners in Ward. We appreciate the questions that you have provided by citizens here this evening, and also through our email, which you can provide questions to our commissioners, which is lwvradnor@gmail.com. Feel free to continue to mail those questions in consideration for next week's event. Remember to vote on November 7th. It's your voice for your future and that of your children. Thank you.